On the night after my father's funeral, my sister showed up on my porch in the Oregon rain with a $120 crystal bottle of vodka and a smile I hadn't seen in 5 years. 40 minutes later, my fiancé collapsed on my kitchen floor, with his heart beating so fast I could see the pulse jumping in his neck. If you've ever had a moment where your entire life split into before and after, you know the feeling. And before I tell you what happened next, do me a favor. If you've ever had someone from your own family betray you, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read every single one. Because what happened that night wasn't just an accident. It was the first crack in a plan my sister had been building for months. And I didn't understand that until much later. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Riley Thompson. I'm 31 years old, and until last winter, I thought the worst thing my sister Madison could do to me was disappear. 5 years earlier, she'd done exactly that. No calls, no birthdays, no holidays, nothing. Not even when our father had his first stroke. I was the one sleeping in a hospital chair beside him. I was the one driving into physical therapy 3 times a week. I was the one arguing with insurance companies at 2 in the morning. Madison was somewhere in Seattle finding herself. At least that's what the one text message she'd sent me said. Then our father died, and suddenly she was back. The funeral was quiet, cold, windy, typical Oregon November. I stood beside the grave while the flag from my father's military service was folded and handed to me. Old habits die hard. I kept my back straight and my face still. Madison cried loudly, the kind of crying that draws attention. She clung to distant cousins and neighbors like she had been there the whole time. When the service ended, she approached me near the parking lot. Her mascara had run just enough to make her look fragile. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what?" I asked. "For leaving. For everything." I didn't answer. 5 years of silence doesn't dissolve with 2 words. She held out a wrapped package. "I brought you something," she said. "Peace offering." Inside was a crystal bottle of vodka. Not cheap stuff either. I recognized the label immediately. Duty-free luxury brand. Around $120. I remember thinking it was a strange gift after a funeral. But grief makes people weird. So I said thank you and took it home. That night, around 8:30 p.m., Madison showed up at my house with the same bottle. "Let's stop fighting for Dad," she said. "Just one drink." It was raining outside, the kind of cold Oregon rain that seeps into your bones. I almost said yes. Almost. But I had a headache and zero desire to drink. "I'll save it for another night," I told her. She looked disappointed for a split second, just a flicker. Then she forced a smile. "Your loss," she said lightly. Around 9:10 p.m., my fiancé Ethan arrived. Ethan Miller, 41 years old, high school physics teacher. The calmest human being I've ever met. He'd come over to help me sort through my father's estate paperwork. When he saw the bottle on the counter, he whistled. "That's the good stuff." "Gift from Madison," I said. He raised an eyebrow. "Your sister Madison?" "Yeah." "That feels suspicious." I laughed. "You're paranoid." "I'm a physics teacher. That's basically the same thing." He opened the bottle. "Just 1 glass," he said. "We deserve it after today." I remember exactly what happened next. He poured 2 glasses, then he looked at me. "You sure you don't want one?" "No," I said. "You go ahead." He shrugged and drank. 40 minutes later, he was on the kitchen floor. The sound his body made when it hit the tile still lives in my head. A hard crack, followed by the metallic rattle of a bar stool tipping over. His glass shattered beside him. Vodka spread across the floor in a thin sheet that smelled faintly bitter, sharper than it should have. "Ethan!" I dropped to my knees. Training kicked in before fear did. Roll him onto his side, check airway, count breaths. His chest jerked in violent spasms. His pulse under my fingers felt wrong. Too fast. Not panic fast. Dangerous fast. Madison stood in the doorway between the kitchen and living room, with one hand over her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. Oh my God, what's happening? You tell me, I snapped, already pulling out my phone. I dialed 911. My fiancé is having a seizure, I told the operator. Possible poisoning. The word slipped out before I even realized I'd said it. Madison's eyes widened. Poisoning? She said quickly. Riley, it's just alcohol. Maybe he hasn't eaten. He had dinner 2 hours ago, I said. Ethan's body arched again. His hand grabbed my sleeve. His heart was racing so violently I could see the pulse beating in his throat. The sirens arrived in under 5 minutes. Paramedics rushed in. Monitors, stretcher, questions. One of them held up the bottle. Anyone else drink this? Madison answered immediately. No, Riley didn't drink any. The paramedic looked at me. Is that correct? Yes, I said. Madison's shoulders dropped. Not in relief for Ethan, in relief for something else. I noticed that, but at the time I didn't understand it. They loaded Ethan into the ambulance. I climbed in beside him barefoot, not even remembering when I'd kicked off my shoes. Inside the ambulance, the air smelled like antiseptic and adrenaline. A medic called out numbers. Heart rate 190, blood pressure unstable. What did he take? Vodka, I said. Anything else? No. But my brain was already running ahead, scanning details the way it used to scan desert roads during my deployment in the Gulf. The bitter smell. Madison asking 3 times if I had drunk any. The way she'd been watching when Ethan poured the glass. At the hospital, they rushed him straight into the emergency room. Madison arrived 10 minutes later. She sat beside me in the waiting area, shaking. Riley, she whispered. I swear I bought that at duty free in Seattle. Which store? I asked. She blinked. What? Which store? I don't remember, she said. Does that matter right now? It might. She stared at me like I'd just accused her of murder. Your fiancé is fighting for his life, she said, and you're interrogating me? Before I could answer, the ER doors opened. A doctor stepped out. Miss Thompson? I stood. Yes? Your fiancé is stable for now, he said, but he experienced a severe cardiac arrhythmia. Madison grabbed my arm. Is it alcohol poisoning? The doctor shook his head slowly. We're running toxicology panels, he said. Then he added something that made the room go silent. His symptoms are consistent with toxin exposure. Madison froze. Toxin? She repeated. The doctor looked at both of us. Did he consume anything unusual tonight? I held Madison's gaze. Vodka, I said, from a bottle my sister brought. Madison didn't cry. She didn't argue. She just went completely still. And in that moment, something cold settled in my stomach. Because I suddenly remembered something Ethan had whispered before the sedatives pulled him under. 3 quiet words. She was watching. Watching who? Me. Waiting for what? For me to drink first. And that was the moment I realized something that still makes my blood run cold. My sister hadn't come back to make peace. She had come back with a plan. And Ethan had just survived the first move. The machines in the ICU didn't beep in a steady rhythm. They stuttered, paused, then shrieked in uneven bursts that made my shoulders tighten every time. Ethan lay pale against the white hospital sheets, wires crossing his chest like a map of electrical storms. His skin looked gray under the fluorescent lights. A thin oxygen tube curved beneath his nose. His eyes fluttered sometimes, but he didn't wake. I stood at the foot of the bed, watching the monitor instead of his face. Heart rate still unstable. Blood pressure climbing and crashing like waves. Not normal, not even close. A doctor in blue scrubs stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. Miss Thompson, he said quietly. I turned. We've confirmed a toxic compound in his bloodstream. The words didn't hit like a punch. They landed like a lock, clicking shut. What kind? I asked. We're still running the full toxicology panel, he said. But preliminary analysis indicates aconitine. The name meant nothing to most people. But I'd heard it once during military training. A plant toxin, fast-acting, deadly in small doses. What does it do? I asked. It disrupts sodium channels in the heart and nervous system, he said. Severe arrhythmia, neurological distress, sometimes cardiac arrest. My jaw tightened. Alcohol accelerates absorption, he added. So if someone drank vodka with it, yes, he said, it would act faster. I looked back at Ethan. He almost died. And if I had taken that drink first, the doctor continued carefully, given your medical history, I didn't let him finish. I already knew. Because Madison had told the nurse about my blood pressure medication earlier. I stepped into the hallway after he left. Madison stood near the vending machines again, pretending to read the back of a snack wrapper. Her eyes lifted the second she saw me. What did they say? She asked. They found a toxin. Her face drained. A toxin in what? In Ethan's blood. She blinked rapidly. That's impossible. It was just vodka. I stepped closer. Vodka with something in it. Her breathing quickened. Are you saying I did that? I'm saying you brought the bottle. She shook her head. I bought it at the airport. It was sealed. Did you open it before giving it to me? No. Did you leave it unattended? I don't know. It was in my bag. In your bag. She crossed her arms defensively. Why are you looking at me like that? Because you've asked 4 times if I drank any. Her lips parted slightly. I was worried about you. Before she could say more, a man in a dark coat walked down the hallway toward us. Mid-40s, detective posture. Miss Thompson, he said. Detective Larson. He flashed a badge quickly. We need to talk. Madison straightened. I'd like to hear this too. He shook his head slightly. Separately. She looked like she wanted to argue. Instead, she folded her arms and watched me walk into the consultation room with him. He closed the door. Your fiancé's toxicology results are preliminary but concerning, he said. Aconitine. Yes. Do you know what that is? A poison. Correct. He flipped open a notebook. We recovered the bottle from your residence. Already? Paramedics secured the scene, he said. The lab found residue inside the bottleneck. Deliberately introduced. My pulse slowed instead of speeding up. Who handled the bottle tonight? He asked. My sister brought it. Your fiancé opened it. Did you drink from it? No. He wrote something down. Your sister emphasized that repeatedly. That I didn't drink? Yes. He watched me carefully. Why would she do that? Because she expected me to. The words hung in the air. Detective Larson didn't react. Is there any financial dispute between you and your sister? He asked. Our father died today. Yes, he said. Did he leave an estate? Yes. Have you reviewed the will? Not yet. He tapped his pen against the notebook. Your sister mentioned earlier that there were disagreements about inheritance. I stared at him. She told you that? Yes. Interesting. Why? Because she's been gone for 5 years. He leaned back slightly. Did she mention the life insurance policy? My stomach tightened. No. She did. When? Earlier this week, he said. She called the county records office, asking about payout timelines. Why would she do that? She said she was helping with paperwork. I didn't answer. Instead, I asked a different question. How much was the policy worth? $750,000. The room felt smaller. I exhaled slowly. Detective, I said, if I had taken that first drink instead of Ethan. He nodded once. Given your medical condition, the outcome could have been fatal. The door opened a few minutes later. Madison sat exactly where I'd left her. Her phone buzzed on the chair beside her. She grabbed it too quickly. Who are you texting? I asked. No one. I leaned against the wall and watched her. 5 years ago, she used to steal my sweaters and beg me not to tell Dad when she snuck out after curfew. Now, I couldn't read her at all. The nurse appeared. He's regained partial consciousness. I went in alone. Ethan's eyes opened slowly when he heard my voice. Riley. I squeezed his hand. I'm here. He swallowed. She was watching.
Who?
Your sister. My chest tightened. Watching how? When I poured the drink, he said weakly. She kept looking at you, like she was waiting. Waiting for what? For you to drink first. I felt something settle into place inside my mind. Cold, precise, a pattern forming. When I stepped back into the hallway, Madison looked up quickly. Is he okay? For now, she exhaled. Thank God. I studied her face. He said you were watching him. Her expression hardened. You're in shock. Maybe, but shock doesn't invent details. I walked toward the exit. Where are you going? She asked. Home. The police still need the bottle. They already have it. She froze. What? I turned back. The lab's analyzing it right now. Her breathing changed. And, Madison, I added quietly, they already found something. Her voice cracked. Found what? Reseal marks. The color drained from her face. You think I poisoned him, she whispered. I think someone did. And you brought the bottle. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she said something that would haunt me later. If you had just let things go, none of this would have happened. Let what go? I asked. But she didn't answer. She just walked out into the cold Oregon night. And as the hospital doors slid closed behind her, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. One message. Stop digging. Then another. Something should stay buried with your father. I stared at the screen because suddenly this didn't feel like family drama anymore. It felt like a warning. And somewhere between the ICU machines and that message, I realized something else. Madison hadn't just brought poison into my house. She had already assumed I'd be dead. I went straight from the hospital to my father's estate attorney. It was just after 6:30 in the morning, barely 12 hours after Ethan collapsed. I hadn't slept. My black funeral dress still smelled faintly like rain and hospital disinfectant. Harold Whitaker's office sat on the second floor of a brick building in downtown Eugene. He had handled my father's legal work for nearly 20 years. If anyone knew the truth about the estate, it would be him. The receptionist looked surprised when I walked in. Miss Thompson, I'm so sorry about your father. Thank you, I said. I need to see Harold. Is this about the will? Yes. Something in my voice must have convinced her, because she disappeared through a side door and returned a minute later. He'll see you now. Harold stood when I entered his office. Late 60s, silver hair, suspenders. The same quiet steadiness he'd always had. Riley, he said gently. I heard about Ethan. He's stable. That's good news. I didn't sit. I need to see the latest version of my father's will. Harold paused, just a fraction too long. Of course, he said, opening a file drawer. He placed a document on the desk and turned it toward me. I scanned the page quickly. Then I stopped. My name wasn't there. Everything, the house, the accounts, the life insurance rights, had been transferred to Madison. All of it. $750,000 in life insurance. Another $300,000 in investments. And the house. Total estate value just over $1.2 million. Left entirely to Madison Thompson. That's not right, I said. Harold frowned. What do you mean? 2 years ago, the will split everything evenly between us. He nodded slowly. Yes, that was the previous version. Previous? My father changed it? Yes. When? 2 weeks before his stroke. The air in the room thinned. He never told me. Harold leaned back slightly. The request came through email. My eyes narrowed. Email? Yes, from you. The words landed like ice water. From me? He turned his monitor so I could see it. Subject line: Urgent revision. Sender address: riley.thompson.official@mailsecure.com. That's not my email, I said immediately. Harold blinked. You're certain? I use my own domain for legal communication. He scrolled down. The email instructed him to remove my name as beneficiary. It included my father's personal details, account numbers, legal language, and my digital signature, forged perfectly. Someone impersonated me. Harold adjusted his glasses. The login credentials were correct. My stomach dropped, meaning whoever sent it knew my password. Where did the login originate? He pulled up the metadata. Seattle. The word echoed in the quiet office. Madison. 10 days before Dad's stroke, I said slowly. Yes. Harold pulled up security footage from that night. The timestamp read 2:23 a.m. A figure in a baseball cap entered the hallway outside his office. Head down, coat pulled tight. But the height, the shoulders, the walk. I recognized it immediately. Madison. How long was she inside, I asked. 8 minutes. 8 minutes was enough. Enough to confirm the document. Enough to change everything. Did she contact you after that, I asked. Yes. Harold opened another file. She called a week later asking about probate timelines. What exactly did she ask? How long after death the estate would transfer? The room felt colder. Did she mention life insurance? Yes. My jaw tightened. Of course she did. Harold watched me carefully. Riley, is there something I should know? Yes, I said quietly. Last night someone tried to poison me. His face went pale. Poison? The vodka my sister brought was laced with aconitine. He leaned back slowly. Good God. I pulled out my phone and showed him the message I'd received. Stop digging. Some things should stay buried with your father. Harold exhaled heavily. This is criminal fraud. It's attempted murder, I corrected. And I think the two are connected. He nodded slowly. If the will remained unchanged and you died, Madison would inherit everything. Yes, including the insurance payout. Exactly. Harold leaned forward. We need to notify the police immediately. Already done. Detective Larson is handling it. Good. He printed both versions of the will and handed them to me. Take these. I slid them into my bag. One more question, I said. Harold nodded. Did my father ever mention being worried about Madison? He hesitated. Once. When? About a month before his stroke. What did he say? He said Madison had been asking about the insurance policy. My chest tightened. And? He told me something I didn't think much about at the time. What? Harold looked down at the desk. He said money makes people show you who they really are. The words lingered between us. I stood. Thank you, Harold. As I walked out of the building, the Oregon sky hung low and gray over downtown. My phone buzzed. Detective Larson. What did you find? He asked. The will was forged. Silence. Explain. I told him everything. The email, the Seattle login, the security footage, the inheritance change. When I finished, he exhaled slowly. That gives us motive. It gives you motive for attempted murder. Exactly. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. There's more. What? The lab finished analyzing the vodka. And? The aconitine concentration was extremely precise. Precise how? Measured. Calculated for body weight. Meaning? Meaning whoever did this didn't just guess the dosage. They researched it. My mind flashed back to Madison standing in my kitchen, watching Ethan pour the drink, watching me, waiting. Detective Larson spoke again. Riley, we pulled financial records connected to your sister. What kind of records? Large withdrawals from your father's account. My pulse slowed. How large? $25,000 2 weeks ago, another $10,000 last week, authorized under your name. I closed my eyes briefly. She didn't just forge the will. She started moving money. Yes. The detective paused. And Riley? Yeah? Your sister has another problem. What? Those withdrawals were sent to an offshore betting account. Gambling. My chest tightened. How much does she owe? We're still calculating, but it looks like several $100,000. The number settled heavily in my stomach. Suddenly everything made sense. The forged will, the poison, the urgency. Madison wasn't trying to hurt me. She was trying to erase me. Because if I died first, she'd inherit everything and clear her debts. I stepped out into the cold air and looked up at the gray sky. Then I said something quietly to myself. Madison didn't just plan a murder. She planned a financial rescue, and I had just ruined it by surviving. 3 days after Ethan collapsed, I stood in my kitchen staring at the empty space where the vodka bottle had been. The police had taken it for evidence, but the faint, bitter smell still lingered in the wood grain of the counter. Aconitine. The word kept repeating in my head. Not something you accidentally spill into alcohol. Not something you casually carry around. It's a plant toxin that requires research, preparation, and deliberate dosing. Someone had planned this. And the more I thought about it, the clearer something became. Madison had expected me to drink first. My phone buzzed. Detective Larson. "We've been reviewing your sister's financial records," he said. "What did you find?" "A lot." He paused. "How familiar are you with sports betting?" "Not at all." "Your sister apparently is." My stomach tightened. "How bad?" "She opened an offshore betting account about 18 months ago. At first, the numbers were small, $500, $1,000. Then the losses started stacking up. How much does she owe now? $412,000. The number sat heavy in my chest. 400,000. That explained everything. The forged will, the urgency, the poison, the insurance policy. If I died, Madison would inherit over $1 million. Enough to wipe out her debt, and enough to make the whole thing look like a tragic medical accident. Detective Larson spoke again. "There's another issue." "What now?" "We pulled surveillance footage from the pharmacy that filled your blood pressure prescription." My body went still. "Why?" "Your sister appears on camera." "When?" 3 days before your father's funeral." The room felt colder. "Doing what?" "Standing near the pickup counter, waiting until the technician stepped away." Then she reached over the counter and handled one of the prescription bags. My prescription bag. She switched the medication. Yes. My throat tightened. So if I had taken my normal dose and had a drink of that vodka, he finished, your blood pressure could have dropped dangerously fast. The doctor at the hospital had already said the same thing. Alcohol plus the substituted medication could trigger fatal arrhythmia, which meant Madison hadn't just poisoned the vodka. She had built a layered plan. If the poison didn't work, the medication would. 2 safety nets, 2 ways to make my death look natural. And suddenly Ethan collapsing instead of me didn't look like an accident. It looked like a mistake in her timing. Detective Larson cleared his throat. "There's something else." "Of course there is." "Your sister called the insurance company 2 weeks ago." My grip tightened on the phone. What did she ask? She asked how long payouts typically take if the cause of death is listed as medical complications. Medical complications. High blood pressure, alcohol, heart failure. It would have looked perfectly believable. Unless someone tested the vodka, which they only did because Ethan had seizures, and because I told the paramedics what he drank. The detective's voice softened slightly. "Riley, I need to ask you something." "Okay." "Has your sister contacted you since the hospital?" "No, not directly." "What do you mean, not directly?" I pulled up the anonymous messages and sent him screenshots. "Stop digging. Some things should stay buried with your father." He was silent for a moment. "We'll trace the number." "You think it's her?" "Maybe. Or someone she owes money to." That thought hadn't fully formed yet, until now. If Madison owed $400,000 to offshore gambling operations, then people besides her had a financial interest in my death. And suddenly, the warning message didn't feel like family drama. It felt like pressure. After I hung up, I walked slowly through the house. The quiet felt different now. Less like grief, more like aftermath. I opened the drawer beside the sink where I kept spare keys. Empty. That stopped me cold. My spare house key was gone. Madison had been here the night before the funeral. She'd insisted on helping me organize the house. 10 minutes alone upstairs, while I answered condolence calls. 10 minutes was enough to take a key, and enough to memorize the alarm code. I checked the security system log. My heart slowed. 2:14 a.m. 2 nights before Ethan collapsed. Alarm disarmed. Correct code entered. Rearmed 13 minutes later. Someone had been inside my house. And it hadn't been me. I called Larson back immediately. Someone used my alarm code 2 nights ago. You're sure? The system log says so. He exhaled slowly. That was probably when the vodka was tampered with. Meaning Madison didn't bring the poison into my house. She added it here. After the funeral. After making sure I still had the bottle. And after switching my medication. A perfect sequence. Step 1. Alter the will. Step 2. Switch the medication. Step 3. Poison the vodka inside my own kitchen. Step 4. Wait for me to drink. It would have looked like natural heart failure from alcohol and blood pressure medication. No crime scene, no suspicion. Just a grieving sister inheriting everything. I leaned against the kitchen counter. Detective Larson spoke again. Riley, you need to stay somewhere else tonight. Why? Because someone with $400,000 in debt doesn't usually work alone. Meaning? Meaning if her creditors were expecting an insurance payout, your survival might be a problem. The words settled heavily. A problem. I looked around the quiet house. My father's chair in the study, the photographs on the wall, the kitchen table where Ethan had almost died. This house wasn't just property, it was memory. And someone had tried to turn it into a murder scene. I picked up the phone again. Detective? Yeah? I'm not leaving. You should reconsider. No. Why? Because whoever did this expected me to be scared. Silence. And if they think I'm running, I said quietly, they'll believe the plan is still working. Another pause. Then Larson said something that made me uneasy. Riley. What? Your sister asked a strange question during her interview. What question? She asked whether you had consumed any alcohol recently. My chest tightened. She was checking if the poison worked. Exactly. Which means one thing. What? She still doesn't know you didn't drink. I stared at the empty spot on the counter again. Because that meant Madison believed something terrifying. She thought the plan had almost succeeded. And if she thought that, she might still try to finish it. 2 nights after the police confirmed the poison, someone tried to enter my house again. The security system woke me at 2:17 a.m. A soft electronic chime. Motion detected. Back door. I was already awake before the sound finished. Years in the military train your body to wake instantly when something is wrong. I slid out of bed quietly and checked my phone. Security camera feed. A shadow moved near the back porch. Tall. Male. Not Madison. My pulse slowed instead of racing. Ethan stirred behind me. What is it? Someone's outside. He sat up immediately. Police? Not yet. The figure stepped closer to the back door camera. Dark coat, baseball cap pulled low, gloved hands. He tested the door handle. Locked. Then he stepped back and looked directly at the camera. Not surprised, not nervous. Like he expected it. My phone buzzed at the same moment. Unknown number. Answer it, Ethan whispered. I stepped into the hallway and answered. A man's voice, calm, measured. Riley Thompson? Yes. This is Victor Russo. The name meant nothing to me. You don't know me, he continued, but you know someone who owes me money. My stomach tightened. Madison. Yes, he spoke like someone discussing overdue rent. Your sister borrowed $412,000 from our organization. I leaned against the wall. And? And she told us the debt would be resolved soon. How? Inheritance, insurance payout, my death? Yes. The word came without hesitation. But you're still alive, he added, which complicates things. I looked at the camera feed again. The man outside the door hadn't moved. That him? I asked. Yes, he's just checking something. Checking what? Whether you're frightened. I almost laughed. He listened for a second. You're not screaming, he said. No. Interesting. Let me guess, I said. Madison promised you the insurance money after I died. Correct. And now you're worried the payout isn't coming. Very. He paused. Your sister made a compelling presentation. What kind of presentation? She explained that your death would appear natural. Medical complications. Alcohol. Blood pressure issues. I closed my eyes briefly. Did she mention poison? No. She described something more subtle, the medication swap, meaning she told them everything. She assured us the timing would be perfect. Funeral week, grief, alcohol. Nobody questions tragedy. My jaw tightened. Except the man drinking the vodka wasn't me. Yes, we heard. Is Ethan alive? Barely. He was an unintended variable. The understatement almost made me smile. So why are you calling me? Because right now your sister is in custody, and our investors have questions. Investors. A polite word for criminals. Victor continued. Your survival creates a problem. What kind of problem? Financial expectations. You mean you want the money? We want resolution. I leaned against the wall and looked toward the back door. The man was still there, watching the camera. You're threatening me, I said. No, I'm explaining the situation, which is? Madison promised payment after your death. Without your death, that payment disappears. That sounds like her problem. Normally, yes, but she used your insurance policy as collateral. My chest tightened. Collateral. Yes, which means some people now believe your survival is interfering with their investment. I stepped closer to the kitchen window. The man outside shifted slightly. Still calm, still waiting. You know this call is being recorded, right? I said. Victor laughed softly. Of course. Which means what? Which means I'm not threatening you. Then why is someone outside my house? Because I wanted you to understand something clearly. What? You are not the only person Madison tried to deceive. I stayed silent. He continued. She told us your death would occur before the funeral. Before the funeral? Yes. But then she called again, 2 days ago. What did she say? That the plan had been delayed. Delayed. She told us you hadn't drunk the vodka yet. My stomach dropped, meaning she expected another opportunity. Exactly. The man outside shifted his weight. Snow crunched under his shoes. So why warn me? I asked. Because your sister's mistake is not our business anymore. What do you mean? If you die now, the investigation becomes complicated. Insurance delays, federal attention, bad for business. So you want me alive? For now. I almost smiled. That's the strangest protection I've ever received. Victor chuckled. Your sister believed she could solve a $400,000 problem with one death. And she almost did. He paused. But people who build plans like that rarely stop at one mistake. My eyes moved back to the camera. The man outside finally stepped away from the door, heading back toward a black SUV parked on the street. Before he got in, he looked at the camera again. Then he waved. Victor spoke again. You see him leaving? Yes. Good. He'll be gone in 10 seconds. And then this becomes a police matter again. Why help me? I asked. Because chaos attracts attention, And attention attracts federal agents. Not good for our industry. He paused. Also, yes, I respect efficient survivors. The line went quiet. Before I could hang up, he added one more thing. Your sister said something interesting during our last call. What? She said you always survive everything. My throat tightened. But this time he continued slowly. She was certain you wouldn't. The line disconnected. Ethan stepped into the hallway. Gone? I checked the camera again. The SUV was already pulling away. Yeah, he exhaled. Who was it? Someone Madison owes money to. He frowned. What did they want? Information. About what? About how close she came to killing me. I walked back into the kitchen and looked at the counter again, the empty space where the bottle had been. You okay? Ethan asked. I nodded slowly. Actually, I felt calmer than I had in days, because the conversation with Victor had confirmed something important. Madison hadn't acted out of rage. She had acted out of calculation. A 3-layer plan. Forged will, medication swap, poisoned vodka. Every step designed to make my death look natural. And every step motivated by the same thing. $400,000 in debt. I picked up my phone and texted Detective Larson. We need to talk. Immediately. 2 minutes later, he called. What happened? Someone just came to my house. My voice stayed steady. And he confirmed something. What? My sister wasn't trying to scare me. She was trying to finish what she started. 3 days after the man stood outside my back door at 2:17 in the morning, the police searched Madison's apartment in Seattle. They called me while I was at the hospital, sitting beside Ethan's bed. Detective Larson's voice was quieter than usual. We found something, he said. What kind of something? Evidence. My chest tightened. Go on. We executed the warrant this morning. And? Your sister kept records. Records of what? Everything. My pulse slowed. Madison had always been obsessive about documentation. Even as a kid, she kept journals, lists, color-coded notebooks. If she'd done the same thing with the plan... What kind of records? I asked. Larson exhaled. Search history, financial logs, and a notebook. A notebook, yes. What's in it? He paused. Your name. The words settled like ice. Several times, he added. I looked through the hospital window at Ethan sleeping. Read me one. Another pause. Riley's schedule. My jaw tightened. She tracked your routines, he said. Work hours, gym days, medication refill dates, doctor appointments. The cold feeling in my stomach deepened. She studied me. For months. What else? I asked. There are timelines. What kind of timelines? When your father's estate would move through probate. When insurance payouts would clear. When you were most likely to drink alcohol socially. My throat felt dry. She predicted behavior. Yes. The detective turned a page. There's also something else. What? Dosage calculations. For aconitine. My fingers tightened around the phone. Based on body weight. Yours. The room felt suddenly smaller. Larson continued quietly. She calculated how much poison would trigger arrhythmia without obvious symptoms. Meaning? Meaning she wanted your death to look like heart failure. Exactly what the doctor had warned about. But there was another detail. Did she mention Ethan? I asked. Yes. My heart stopped for a second. What did she write? Collateral risk. The words echoed inside my head. Collateral risk. Meaning she knew someone else could drink the vodka. Yes. But she assumed you would drink first. Of course she did. The detective flipped another page. There's a line here I want to read you. Go ahead. If Riley dies before probate closes, inheritance transfers directly. Insurance payout clears debt. Problem solved. I stared at the hospital floor. Problem solved. Larson spoke again. There's also a list of alternative scenarios. My pulse slowed. Alternative? Yes, if poison fails. What does it say? Medication interaction. Your chest tightened. She planned backup plans. Exactly. 2 layers. Poison, medication. And if both failed, I asked? Silence. Larson cleared his throat. There's a third option written here. My voice dropped. What is it? It says accident. Accident. Yes. Car crash, house fire, fall downstairs. The words felt unreal. She was willing to keep trying until one worked. I closed my eyes for a moment. Detective. Yeah? How detailed is the notebook? He hesitated. Very. How many pages? 27. All about me. Yes. When I opened my eyes again, Ethan was watching me. Bad news? He asked softly. I nodded. She wrote it all down. He frowned. What do you mean? Everything. The poison, the medication, even backup plans if both failed. His face hardened. She really meant to kill you. Yes. The detective's voice came back through the phone. There's one more thing. Of course there is. We also recovered text messages between Madison and someone named Victor. Yes. Do you want to hear one? I braced myself. Read it. Larson read slowly. Once Riley's gone, probate clears faster. I felt Ethan's hand tighten around mine. There's another message, Larson said. What does it say? She always survives everything. The words sent a chill down my spine. But this time, she won't. Silence filled the hospital room. After a moment, Larson spoke again. Riley. Yeah? Your sister didn't just plan this. She rehearsed it. What do you mean? She practiced explanations. What kind of explanations? What she would tell police, what she would tell doctors, what she would tell Lily. My chest tightened. Lily. Madison's 11-year-old daughter. What did she tell her? I asked quietly. Larson flipped another page. It says... He stopped. Just read it. If Riley dies, say she had heart problems. My stomach dropped. She coached her own child. Yes. I looked back at Ethan. He understood immediately. This wasn't just murder planning. It was narrative control. Madison had rehearsed the aftermath, how grief would look, how confusion would sound, how sympathy would flow. She planned the entire story. The detective continued. Riley, based on what we found, your sister didn't intend to stop with the vodka. My voice was quiet. I figured that out. There was a pause. Then Larson said something that made my blood run cold. We also found a purchase receipt. For what? Aconite extract. When? 6 weeks before the funeral. Online order, delivered to her Seattle apartment. Meaning she acquired the poison weeks before my father died. Yes. Which means something I hadn't wanted to consider. She started planning my death while Dad was still alive. I stood up slowly from the hospital chair. Detective. Yeah? My sister didn't come back for the funeral. No. She came back to finish the plan. Exactly. I ended the call and stood in the quiet hospital room. Ethan watched me carefully. How bad is it? I looked out the window. Snow had started falling again. Soft, silent. She spent months preparing to kill me. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he asked the question that had been forming in my mind too. Why? $400,000. He nodded slowly. Money, yes, but that wasn't the whole answer. Because as I stood there thinking about Madison's notebook, something else kept bothering me. A line from the messages Larson had read. She always survives everything, but this time she won't. I turned back toward Ethan. You know what's strange? What? Madison didn't hate me. He frowned. What do you mean? This wasn't emotional. This was business. She treated my death like a financial transaction. And the worst part? What? She believed it would work. 7 days after the police found Madison's notebook, the house became too quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet in a way that made every small sound stand out. The refrigerator humming, the floorboards settling, the wind brushing the back porch. Ethan was still recovering at the hospital, so for the first time since the funeral, I was alone in the house overnight. Detective Larson had suggested I stay somewhere else, a hotel, a friend's place, anywhere but here. But I didn't, because if Madison had spent months studying my routines, then leaving would mean letting her control the last move, and I was done letting her move pieces on the board. At 8:30 p.m., I locked the front door. At 8:31, I checked the security cameras. Street empty. Backyard empty. No cars parked where they shouldn't be. Still, I knew something had changed. The police had searched Madison's apartment. They had her notebook, her financial records, her messages with Victor, which meant her entire plan was collapsing. And when a plan collapses, desperate people sometimes try one last thing. I sat at the kitchen table where Ethan had collapsed weeks earlier. The tile had already been replaced, but I could still see the seam where the new piece met the old floor. A scar. Scars don't disappear, they integrate. My phone buzzed. Detective Larson. "You alone tonight?" he asked. "Yes." "Any activity around the house?" "No." "Good." He hesitated. "We spoke to Madison again today. What did she say?" "Not much. Still denying everything." "Of course she was. But she asked about you." My chest tightened. "What exactly?" "She asked if you were scared." I almost laughed. "What did you tell her?" "That's not information we provide suspects." Smart answer. There was a pause. "Riley," he said. "Yeah?" "Your sister believes something." "What?" "That you're weak." "Weak?" "Yes, because you didn't leave the house. Work to our advantage." "How?" He cleared his throat. "She thinks I'm hiding." "Exactly, which might work to our advantage." "How?" He cleared his throat. "She's been asking if you'd be willing to meet her." My stomach tightened. "Where?" "At the county jail." "Why?" "She says she wants to apologize." I shook my head slowly. Madison doesn't apologize. That was my thought, too. So what does she want? Probably information. About what? What the police know. And what I know. Yes. I stood and walked toward the living room window. Street still empty. "Tell her yes," I said. Larson was quiet for a second. "You're serious?" "Completely." "Why?" "Because if Madison thinks she still controls the story, she might finally tell the truth." He considered that. "We can record the conversation." "Good. But Riley." "Yeah?" "You need to be careful. She's manipulative." "I know." After we hung up, I sat in the dark living room for a while. The house felt different now. Less like a battlefield, more like a waiting room. And that's when I noticed something strange. One of the picture frames on the hallway wall was crooked. I hadn't touched it. Ethan hadn't been home, which meant someone else had. My pulse slowed. I walked over slowly. The photo was one from years ago. Madison and me as teenagers. Braces, bad haircuts, standing in front of our father's truck. For a moment, I just stared at it. Then I straightened the frame. And that's when I saw the edge of a small white envelope taped behind it. My heart dropped. Carefully, I peeled it off the back. No name, no stamp, just one sentence written in block letters. "You can still walk away." I stared at the message. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I answered. Victor Russo. "You received our note," he said. My jaw tightened. "You were inside my house." "Yes." "How?" "Your sister was helpful. She gave us the key." "Of course she did." He continued calmly. You should consider the message. Why? Because continuing this investigation will not bring your sister back. I almost laughed. My sister tried to kill me. Yes, and now she will go to prison. Probably. But prison doesn't pay debts. The implication was clear. Victor's organization had lost its investment, which meant someone would eventually pay for that loss. And they were still evaluating who. What do you want from me? I asked. Nothing. Then why are you calling? Because you are making an interesting choice. What choice? You are not afraid. He sounded genuinely curious. Should I be? Most people would be. Most people haven't already survived the plan. He chuckled softly. Your sister underestimated you. I know. She believed you would drink the vodka. She also believed something else. What? That if the poison failed, you would panic, run, disappear. And you didn't. No. Which means the entire strategy failed. Good. Victor paused. But there is still one variable she did not predict. Which is? Your meeting with her tomorrow. My grip tightened. You know about that. Yes. How? We listen carefully. What do you think she'll say? I asked. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that sent a chill down my spine. She will try to convince you it wasn't personal. I leaned against the wall. Because for her, he continued, it wasn't. The line went silent. When I hung up, I stood in the hallway for a long time, looking at the crooked picture frame, at the envelope, at the memory of the two teenagers smiling in that photo. Madison had once been my little sister. Now she was the woman who had written 27 pages planning my death. And tomorrow I was going to sit across from her in a jail visiting room. The strange part? I wasn't angry anymore. I was curious. Because there was one question that had been growing in my mind since Larson read the notebook. A question I wanted Madison to answer directly. If you knew I might survive, why didn't you stop? The county jail visiting room smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee. It was 10:14 in the morning when the guard escorted me through the last metal door. I had slept exactly 4 hours the night before. Not because I was nervous, because my mind kept replaying the same question. Why didn't she stop? If Madison knew the poison might fail, if she knew someone else could drink it, why didn't she stop the plan? The guard pointed to a plastic chair. Sit here. I nodded. A metal table separated 2 rows of chairs, bolted to the floor. Cameras set high in the corners. Detective Larson had already confirmed everything would be recorded. Still, the room felt smaller than I expected. More intimate, more personal, almost like a stage. You ready? The guard asked. Yes. He opened the second door. Madison walked in 2 seconds later. Orange jail uniform, hair tied back, no makeup, but the same posture, straight back, controlled expression. She sat down across from me and folded her hands on the table. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. 5 years of silence, then weeks of chaos, and now this. She studied my face. You look tired, she said. You tried to poison me. She tilted her head slightly. Allegedly. I almost smiled. You always liked legal language. It's useful. Silence stretched between us. Then she leaned back in the chair. I didn't think you'd come. Why? Because you're careful. Because you usually avoid emotional confrontation. That part was true. But this wasn't emotional anymore. This was informational. You asked to see me, I said. She nodded. I wanted to talk before things get worse. Worse than attempted murder? Her eyes flickered slightly. You're still dramatic. I leaned forward. Madison. Yeah? The police found your notebook. For the first time, her expression changed, just a fraction. What notebook? 27 pages. Search history, dosage calculations, probate timelines. Her fingers tightened around each other. People write things down all the time. Yes, but most people don't write backup plans for their sister's death. She looked at the table, then back at me. You survived. I did, which means the plan failed. She exhaled slowly. You're assuming there was a plan. The poison in the vodka says there was. She didn't answer. I decided to change direction. You owe $400,000. Her eyes sharpened. Did Victor tell you that? Yes. She leaned back again. He's very talkative. You used my life insurance as collateral. Business decision. My stomach tightened. Business. Yes. You tried to kill me for a gambling debt. Not exactly. Then explain it. She studied me for a long moment. You want honesty? Yes. Fine. She leaned forward slightly. This wasn't about killing you. The words hung in the air. It wasn't? No. Then what was it about? Solving a problem. I almost laughed. The problem being $400,000. Correct. You were the solution. The calmness in her voice was surreal. You planned my death like a math equation. She shrugged. I planned an outcome. And if Ethan died instead? She hesitated. Collateral risk. The same phrase Larson had read from the notebook. You wrote that down, I said quietly. Yes. My jaw tightened. Did you ever think about Lily? Her eyes flickered. Of course. You coached her to lie. I prepared her for questions. She looked annoyed now. You don't understand how investigations work. No, I said. I understand exactly how they work. That's why you're sitting here. Silence fell again. Finally, I asked the question that had been haunting me. Why didn't you stop? She blinked. What? When Ethan collapsed, when you realized something went wrong, why didn't you stop? Madison stared at me like the question confused her. Stop what? The plan. Her lips parted slightly, then she laughed, a short, humorless sound. You really don't understand, do you? Explain it to me. She leaned forward. At that point, it was already moving. Moving? Yes. The debt. Victor. The insurance timeline. Everything was in motion. You could have warned me. Why? Because I'm your sister. Her eyes hardened. Exactly. The word landed like a stone. You were always the one with everything, she continued. Dad trusted you. You handled the accounts, the house, the decisions. Because I stayed. Yes, because you stayed. Her voice sharpened, and you never once noticed how that looked from the outside. From where? From second place. I stared at her. So this was jealousy. No, she shook her head. This was opportunity. Opportunity. Yes, you had an insurance policy worth $750,000. You had blood pressure medication that could interact with alcohol. And you had a habit of drinking when you were stressed. My stomach turned. She had studied me, like a target. She continued calmly. All the variables lined up. Variables. You mean my life? Yes. I leaned back slowly. And if I died? Then the estate transferred. The insurance cleared. The debt disappeared. Problem solved. The phrase echoed again. Problem solved. I watched her carefully. You don't hate me, I said. She looked surprised. No. Then why? Because hate is emotional. This wasn't. Then what was it? She looked directly into my eyes. Efficiency. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, I stood up. We're done. She frowned. That's it? Yes. I turned toward the door. Behind me, she said something quietly. You know what's funny? I paused. What? You always survive everything. The same sentence Victor had quoted. I didn't turn around. This time I did too, I said. and I walked out. But as the guard led me down the hallway, one thought kept repeating in my mind. Madison wasn't angry. She wasn't remorseful. She wasn't even defensive. She was disappointed because the math hadn't worked. And for the first time since the night Ethan collapsed, I understood something clearly. My sister had never been trying to hurt me. She had simply been trying to remove an obstacle. The trial started 4 months later. Winter had already turned to early spring in Oregon. The rain was softer, the air warmer, but the courthouse still felt cold. Cold in the way buildings do when too many painful stories pass through them. I sat on a wooden bench outside courtroom 3B at 8:42 in the morning. Ethan sat beside me, still thinner than before, but stronger every week. The poison had damaged his heart, but the doctors believed he would recover fully. The defense table inside the courtroom was still empty. Madison hadn't arrived yet. Detective Larson stepped into the hallway carrying a thick folder. "You ready for this?" he asked. "As ready as I'll ever be." He sat down beside us. "The prosecution has everything. The notebook, the pharmacy footage, the poison purchase, the forged will, the messages to Victor." I nodded. "Still, trials aren't math equations." "What do you mean?" "Defense attorneys look for doubt, even small doubt." I understood. All they had to do was suggest someone else tampered with the bottle, or that Ethan's symptoms came from something unrelated, or that Madison's notebook was just fantasy writing. Truth doesn't always win in court. But evidence helps. The courtroom doors opened at 9 o'clock. We filed in. Madison entered from the side door 2 minutes later, escorted by a deputy. Orange jumpsuit again, hair longer now, but the same calm posture. She looked around the room once. Her eyes stopped on me. No anger, no apology, just observation, like she was studying the outcome of an experiment. The prosecutor began with the timeline. First, the forged will. A screen displayed the email sent from the fake account, the metadata, Seattle login. Then, the security footage from Harold Whitaker's office hallway. The figure in the baseball cap, the walk, the height. Madison's attorney objected. Speculation. But the judge allowed the footage. Next came the pharmacy video. The technician stepping away. Madison reaching over the counter, switching the prescription bag. Jurors leaned forward in their seats. Then the toxicology report. Aconitine detected in Ethan's bloodstream. Residue in the vodka bottle. The dosage calculation for Madison's notebook matched almost exactly. And finally, the messages. The prosecutor read them slowly. Once Riley's gone, probate clears faster. Insurance payout clears debt. Problem solved. The room stayed silent. Madison watched the jurors carefully. Still calm, still analytical, like she was evaluating their reactions. Then the defense stood. "Ladies and gentlemen," the attorney began, "this case is built on assumptions." He paced slowly in front of the jury. "My client never forced anyone to drink that vodka. She never admitted poisoning it. And the so-called notebook?" He held up a copy. "Ideas written during financial stress, not evidence of action." He pointed toward Ethan. "And yet Mr. Miller survived, which proves the poison dose was not intended to kill." The prosecutor stood immediately. "Objection!" But the seed had been planted. Intent. That would be the battlefield. After lunch, they called Ethan to testify. He walked to the stand slowly, placed his hand on the Bible, swore the oath. Then the prosecutor asked the question everyone had been waiting for. "What do you remember about the night you became ill?" Ethan looked toward the jury. I opened the vodka bottle. I poured 2 glasses. He paused. Madison was watching Riley. Watching how? Like she was waiting for something. Waiting for what? For Riley to drink first. The courtroom stayed silent. Then the defense attorney approached. "Mr. Miller." "Yes." "You had consumed alcohol earlier that evening, correct? 1 beer with dinner. So your memory may not be perfect." "My memory is clear." He nodded politely. "But you cannot say you saw Madison poison the bottle." "No." You cannot say she intended to harm you. No. The attorney smiled slightly. Thank you. When Ethan stepped down, the prosecutor called the final witness, Detective Larson. He described the investigation step by step. The notebook, the purchase of aconite extract online, the text messages, the security logs showing someone entering my house at 2:14 a.m., and finally, the financial records. $412,000 in gambling debt. The defense attorney stood. Detective? Yes. Is it possible someone else tampered with the vodka bottle? Anything is possible. Exactly. Is it possible the poison entered the bottle after it left my client's possession? Possible. Yes. Larson stayed calm, but the evidence indicates otherwise. Indicates. The defense attorney emphasized the word, not proves. The judge called for closing arguments the next morning. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was afraid Madison might win, but because something about the trial kept bothering me. Something small, something subtle. Madison had barely spoken the entire time. She watched, calculated, but she never looked surprised. Not once. Almost like she already knew how this would end. The next morning, the courtroom filled again. The prosecutor spoke first. This case is about planning, months of planning. A forged will, a switched medication, poison in a bottle, a debt that could be erased with one death. Then the defense stood. This case is about assumptions. No witness saw my client poison the bottle. No camera captured her doing so. And the victim survived. Ladies and gentlemen, that is not attempted murder. That is tragedy. The jury left to deliberate at 2:17 p.m. 4 hours later, they returned. The courtroom stood. The foreperson held the verdict sheet. On the charge of attempted murder, guilty. Madison didn't react. On the charge of fraud and financial manipulation, guilty. Still calm. On the charge of poisoning resulting in bodily harm, guilty. The judge thanked the jury. Sentencing would happen in 6 weeks. As deputies moved to escort Madison out, she finally turned toward me. For the first time since the trial began, she spoke. Quietly, almost thoughtfully. You know what the worst part is? I didn't answer. She smiled faintly. The math should have worked. Then the deputy guided her through the side door. And just like that, the woman who had spent months planning my death disappeared down a hallway. Ethan squeezed my hand. It's over. I nodded. But deep down, I knew something strange. The trial had answered the legal questions, but one question still lingered in my mind. Madison had believed the plan was perfect. So perfect, she wrote it down step by step, which meant one thing. If Ethan hadn't collapsed that night, I would have been the one on the kitchen floor. 6 weeks after the verdict, the courtroom filled again for sentencing. Spring had fully arrived in Oregon. The courthouse windows were open slightly, letting in the smell of rain and wet pavement. But inside the room, the air felt heavy. Sentencing days always carry a different kind of tension. Trials are about truth. Sentencing is about consequence. I sat in the same wooden seat I had during the trial, Ethan beside me, Detective Larson 2 rows back. Madison entered through the side door, wearing county jail clothes again. But this time, something about her posture was different. Not nervous, not scared, just quiet, like someone who had finished calculating a problem. The judge began by reviewing the charges: attempted murder, poisoning resulting in bodily harm, fraud, financial manipulation. Then he looked down at the file. "Miss Thompson," he said, "you demonstrated extraordinary planning in this crime." The courtroom stayed silent. "You forged legal documents, tampered with prescription medication, and introduced a lethal toxin into a beverage intended for your sister." Madison stared straight ahead. "Your actions nearly killed an innocent man." The judge paused. Then he said something that caught everyone's attention. "However, your defense has presented a psychological evaluation." The defense attorney nodded slightly. The judge continued. The evaluation indicates that your decision-making process was not driven by rage or hatred. That part was obvious. Instead, it suggests something else. He flipped a page. A severe pattern of instrumental thinking. Meaning, you treated human relationships as logistical problems to solve. Madison blinked once. The judge continued. In simple terms, you reduced your sister's life to a financial variable. The phrase echoed in the courtroom. A financial variable. Exactly what she had admitted during our conversation in jail. The judge leaned forward slightly. Miss Thompson, do you have anything to say before sentencing? The courtroom turned toward her. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she stood slowly. Yes, Your Honor. Her voice was calm, clear, almost professional. I want to clarify something. The judge nodded. Go ahead. She turned slightly toward the courtroom, toward the jury box that had been empty for weeks, toward the seats where Ethan and I sat. This was never about hate. She looked directly at me. It was about probability. A quiet ripple moved through the room. Probability, she repeated. My sister had a life insurance policy worth $750,000. She had a medical condition that could interact with alcohol, and she had predictable routines. She spoke like she was presenting a business case. The judge frowned. Miss Thompson, this is not, but she continued. The probability of success was extremely high. My stomach tightened. You calculated my death. Yes, the judge interrupted. Miss Thompson. She stopped speaking, but the point had already landed. The judge took a slow breath. Very well. He looked down at the file one final time. Then he delivered the sentence. For attempted murder, 20 years in state prison. For poisoning resulting in bodily harm, 8 additional years. For fraud and financial crimes, 7 years. All sentences to run consecutively, 35 years total. The room stayed silent. Madison didn't react. No shock, no anger, just the same still expression. The judge closed the file. You will be eligible for parole after 22 years. The gavel struck once. Court is adjourned. Deputies stepped forward to escort Madison away. As she passed the row where I sat, she paused for a fraction of a second. Then she said something quietly. So quietly, only I heard it. I miscalculated one variable. I didn't answer. Because I already knew what that variable was. She had assumed I would drink the vodka. But instead, Ethan had. And that tiny change in the equation had destroyed everything. The deputies guided her toward the door. And just like that, Madison disappeared from my life again. But this time, not by choice. Outside the courthouse, the rain had started again. Ethan exhaled slowly. 35 years. I nodded. It's over. Detective Larson stepped beside us. Actually, he said, there's one more thing. My stomach tightened. What now? Victor Russo. The name still felt strange. What about him? Larson pulled out his phone. Federal agents arrested him yesterday. For what? Money laundering, illegal gambling operations, racketeering. Turns out, Madison's case opened a lot of doors. The domino effect. Yes, Victor's organization collapsed within a week, which means something important. What? The debt Madison was trying to pay doesn't exist anymore. I looked out at the rain falling across the courthouse steps. $400,000, a forged will, a poisoned bottle, a nearly dead fiancé, 35 years in prison, all for a debt that disappeared anyway. Ethan shook his head. Unbelievable. I nodded slowly. But the strangest part wasn't the prison sentence. It wasn't the debt. It wasn't even the poison. The strangest part was something Madison had said in the courtroom. Probability. She had believed the numbers guaranteed success. But life doesn't follow equations. Because sometimes, one small unexpected variable changes everything. And in this case, that variable was simple. I didn't drink the vodka. A year passed before I saw Madison again, not in person, not across a courtroom, but in a letter. It arrived on a gray October afternoon, almost exactly 1 year after the night Ethan collapsed in my kitchen. The envelope had a state prison return address, my name written in Madison's neat handwriting. For 10 minutes, I just stared at it on the kitchen table. Ethan sat across from me with a mug of coffee. "You don't have to open it," he said. "I know, but I probably will. Because curiosity is a powerful thing, especially when the person writing the letter once spent months planning your death." I slid my finger under the envelope seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No greeting, no apology, just Madison's handwriting. "Riley, prison is quieter than I expected. People imagine constant noise, violence, chaos. But most days, it's just silence and routine. Wake up, count, breakfast, work assignment, count again. It's a very mathematical environment." I stopped reading for a second. Even here, she was still thinking in systems. I continued. "I've had time to review the variables that failed." My stomach tightened. Of course she had. First mistake, assuming you would drink. Second mistake, assuming no one else would. Third mistake, underestimating your ability to adapt under pressure. Ethan leaned forward slightly. "She's analyzing it like a failed experiment." "Yes." The letter continued. "The truth is, the plan was elegant. The forged will ensured inheritance. The medication interaction created medical plausibility. The poison accelerated the outcome. 3 layers, statistically reliable." I exhaled slowly. She still believed the plan was good. Then, the letter changed tone slightly. What I did not account for was unpredictability. Ethan drinking first, the paramedics testing the alcohol. Your decision to tell them exactly what he consumed. That variable destroyed the probability model. Probability model. Even now, she couldn't call it what it was. Attempted murder. I read the last paragraph. "You asked me something in the jail visiting room. Why didn't I stop?" The answer is simple. Once the system was in motion, stopping would have created greater risk than continuing. That line sat heavy in the room. She had treated my death like a machine that couldn't be turned off once it started. The letter ended with one final sentence. "If you want honesty, Riley, the math still says it should have worked." No signature, just the blank bottom of the page. Ethan leaned back. "That's disturbing." "Yes, but I didn't feel angry reading it, not even sad, just clarity. Because Madison had finally confirmed something important. She never saw me as a person, only as a variable, a number in an equation, a piece on a board. I folded the letter and set it back on the table. "What are you going to do with it?" Ethan asked. "Keep it." "Why?" "Because someday Lily might want to understand what happened." Madison's daughter had been living with our aunt since the trial. She was 12 now, old enough to start asking questions, hard questions. I stood and walked to the kitchen window, the same window I had looked through the night Victor's man stood outside. Everything looked different now, calmer, normal. But scars change how you see normal. Ethan joined me. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you had taken that drink?" "Yes." "What do you think would have happened?" I watched the rain falling on the backyard. "Honestly? What?" "The doctors would have said it was a heart complication. Alcohol and medication. A tragic coincidence. And Madison would have inherited everything." He nodded slowly. "The perfect crime." "Exactly. But perfect crimes depend on perfect predictions. And Madison's biggest mistake had nothing to do with poison or forged wills. Her biggest mistake was believing life behaves like math. But people are messy, unpredictable, human. And that's what saved me. I picked up the letter again and slid it into a drawer. Then I locked the drawer. Not because I feared the words, but because some things belong in the past. Still, as I turned off the kitchen light that night, one thought stayed with me. Madison believed the equation should have worked. And maybe she was right. Because if one small moment had gone differently, if I had accepted that glass of vodka instead of Ethan, then the letter arriving in that envelope wouldn't have been written by my sister. It would have been written about me. 2 years after the trial, I finally sold the house. Not because I hated it, not because it held bad memories, but because some places carry too much history to keep living inside them. The kitchen still looked the same. New tile where Ethan had collapsed, the same window above the sink, the same counter where the vodka bottle had sat. An ordinary bottle that almost ended my life. The realtor handed me the final paperwork that afternoon. "Congratulations, Riley." "Thank you." The new owners were a young couple expecting their first child. They loved the house, loved the backyard, loved the quiet neighborhood. They had no idea what had happened in that kitchen, and that was fine. Not every story needs to stay attached to the place where it began. Ethan waited for me outside beside the moving truck. "You ready?" he asked. "Yeah." I took one last look through the front door. For a moment, I saw flashes of everything that had happened there. My father sitting in his chair reading the newspaper. Madison and I arguing in the hallway years ago. The night Ethan collapsed on the floor. The ambulance lights reflecting through the windows. The detectives walking through the kitchen with gloves and evidence bags. A whole life contained in a few rooms. Then I closed the door. We drove away 5 minutes later. No dramatic goodbye, no emotional speech. Just the quiet understanding that some chapters end best when you simply leave. A few months later, Ethan and I moved to a small coastal town 2 hours north. Different house, different rhythm, different life. The ocean helped. Something about the constant movement of water makes everything else feel smaller. One evening that summer, we sat on the beach watching the tide roll in. Ethan handed me a cold drink. Soda. I raised an eyebrow. "Still checking?" He smiled. "Habit now." Fair enough. We sat there for a while listening to the waves. Then he asked something I hadn't heard in a long time. "Do you ever think about Madison?" "Sometimes." "What do you think about?" I watched the horizon. "Honestly, the math." He laughed quietly. "Of course you do. Because she wasn't entirely wrong." "What do you mean?" She built a plan with 3 layers: the forged will, the medication swap, the poisoned vodka. Statistically speaking, it should have worked. Ethan nodded slowly. But it didn't. No. And the reason it didn't was incredibly small. What? One decision. I didn't want to drink that night. That was it. Not a heroic moment, not some grand act of courage, just a simple choice. "No thanks. You go ahead." And that tiny decision destroyed months of planning. It unraveled forged documents, poison calculations, financial schemes, and gambling debts, all because of one unpredictable human moment. Ethan looked out at the water. "You know what's strange?" "What?" "If Madison had just waited." "For what?" "The federal investigation that shut down Victor Russo's operation? The one that erased her debt anyway." "Exactly. $400,000. A life insurance policy. A nearly perfect murder plan. 35 years in prison. All for a problem that disappeared on its own." The waves rolled quietly against the sand. I thought about the letter Madison had sent, about the sentence she wrote. The math still says it should have worked. Maybe it should have, but life isn't math. It's chaos, emotion, chance, tiny, unpredictable decisions. And sometimes, those decisions save your life. The sun dropped slowly behind the horizon. Ethan stood and offered his hand. "Ready to go home?" I took it. "Yeah." As we walked back toward the car, I realized something I hadn't noticed before. For the first time in 2 years, I hadn't thought about the vodka. Not the poison, not the plan, not the trial. Just the ocean, the sunset, and the quiet feeling of a life moving forward. Some stories end with revenge. Some end with justice. Mine ended with something simpler. A single decision that changed everything. I didn't drink the vodka.